Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to spend another couple of videos and talk about data modeling. Explain what simple data modeling is, how you should be interested in it no matter what you are doing with the data, and some best practices and tips for how to develop effective data models, use effective data models within your development process and your report generation and any other work that you do with the data that has been given to you for analysis. And this is going to be the first step of this, which is really talking about logical data models, which is a higher level thought process and modeling that you need to do to get an understanding of the data that was within your enterprise, that's within your department, or just simply within a set of data that you're receiving so that you can begin to lay out how you're going to utilize that data and how you're going to process that data. The syllabus for this part one, we're going to talk about something quite old, which is Zachman's framework, something I learned many years ago as far as an architectural methodology by which you can begin to look at the work that you're engaging in. We're going to talk about building what's considered an enterprise logical data model, which is your highest level data model, and to see why this is useful and important first step. We'll build a logical data model for some of the data that we've been working with so we can drill this down to another level so you can begin to see how your logical data model would fit and be generated for within your specific subject area that you're dealing with. And we'll talk a little bit about what the impacts of having a living logical data model will mean to you as you go through your journey. So why would you want to model your data? When I first got into data architecture, I did a lot of studying at the guidance of my mentor into the construction industry. Because the construction industry is where the whole concept of models originally started, and they've got it completely right and they utilize it all the time. I am always amazed, and actually I watched them build a shopping center, demolished an existing one and built a brand new shopping center from the window of my daughter's apartment as I was spending time in her world and helping take care of her just born child, which is my first grandchild. And it was great to see how all of this came together and seemed to be very disorganized but extremely structured. And that was the same time that I was learning about architecture from a data, or applying what I had learned from data architecture into a major corporation. And so what they do in the construction industry is they all understand what a blueprint is. There's a standard blueprint. There's a standard different types of blueprints. There's standard symbols on the blueprints themselves that everyone can understand. And before they begin their project, they go ahead and start with the blueprinting, as well as building small models. Because everybody can see this, like, this is what your building is going to look like when we're done. Isn't it great? And they even put little people and things like that on them because it's very important for them to be able to see what it is that they are going to be building, so everybody can see it, from the consumers as well as anyone involved in the actual construction. They have a common language. They talk the same things. When they call a door, everybody knows what a door is. When they talk about a window, they talk about a landing. All of this is known throughout the industry. And so we do the same thing within data architecture as well, hopefully, which is that when we mention a table, everybody knows what we're talking about. And they never start from scratch. They always review existing projects to see what else they can learn from what somebody else has done, so that it's not brand new every time they do it. It has some best practices and some reliable methodology that has gone into the industry to see. And then finally, once they start that project, everybody understands where they are going, what they are doing, timelines involved, etc. And so when you're beginning your data project, it's always nice to keep this in mind and do these same things within your team, within your organization, so that you can be much more successful heading through it. The other thing to do is to have a basic methodology in mind, and this isn't something like using Teams for meetings or using a waterfall project or using many of the other methodologies for development that are out there. This is more the thought process, the framework that you would do. And when Zachman came up with this, it's calls it an enterprise anthology, and it is not on a specific method of implementation. Rather, it is understanding how to organize and how to pass through what it is that you are executing and generating architectural artifacts along the way. In short, it's simply a way to organize the elements associated with solving your business requirement. That's my quote, not the one on Wiki. And I always have a picture of Zachman floating around that I am more than happy to share with anyone that will want to see it. This is one of the many manifestations of Zachman's framework. As you can see, what it talks about is the things that you're doing in a pattern or methodology of doing them. And in a development project, what you do is you head down and right simultaneously. So you sort of start up here and you head through filling in all these blocks. This is very, very detailed. It has a lot of information, but when you're dealing with data, you notice that there is a column for the things that you do with data, as well as then functionality. So when I begin a data project, I sort of start here with the scope, which is the planner, which is simply a list of important things that you need to do. So you list out what is in your data world or your enterprise world, and you start from there. You then go to building a enterprise conceptual model, you develop a logical model, a physical model, and then when you're done, if you do all of this, you actually have a data definition available. Along the way, while this is happening, you're also heading in this direction as well. And I like to point out these two boxes, which is to understand from a high conceptual level, what are the processes that your business performs? Because when you understand the data, you understand your business process, your data begins to make sense and you can hang it onto the things that are happening within your organization. And it's always helpful to have a model that shows in detail or pictorially what those business processes are, but that's more or less a development team, and it's something that I sort of look for finding if I'm dealing with data to understand, or I build some high-level ones as well. So I tend to deal in this world from a data architecture standpoint as I'm heading into a data project. And so it's good to see that these are the steps that you'll be taking, because today we're going to be talking about this enterprise data model and the system logical model of these two steps. And we're going to start out with a list of things. Let's go ahead and drag this out of the way. So what is a logical model? Well, there's different levels of logical models that you can generate. You can have one at the very high level of an enterprise, which we'll be dealing with first, or it might be something much more focused and a little bit more detail or more content driven, which would be a subject matter logical model. Data architects like to always have a logical model available to them so that they can understand where they are going when they deal with specific tables and requirements. The question is always, what do you put in your logical model? How do you maintain your logical model? And where does it fit within the process? Well, if you get a group of 4 or 5 data architects together and you begin to talk about what logical models are, you'll get a really nice discussion as to how they specifically use a logical model. And so to that point, if you have a vision of what you are going to be doing with your data model, then that's fine. And long as you agree to that and see to that, it can be what you need it to be. And the primary difference between them is how much detail do you put into your logical model. I always tend to stick to this one, which is a high-level view of data structures, even at the subject matter level, because I'm using this to have a discussion with the business about what we are doing, or with the owner of the data about what they have done and how I see it. Other people like to have the logical model simply be the physical model with business terms for the attributes as opposed to the abbreviated or some other type of required physical names of your tables and attributes. And again, either of those is right. You might actually end up doing both of those along the way, but I tend to stick at this level when I'm dealing with my logical models. Tools of the trade. How are you going to develop this model? Well, there are a lot of different ways to get to your logical model. We'll talk about the physical model at another time, but these are some of the ones that you'll be out there and you can use and that I like to use as well. You'll find out there the two big ones, which is ER Studio and Irwin Data Modeler. These are what the data architects use and the data modelers use. They are fairly expensive to have a license to, and you will find that they're very, very controlled by your data architecture team. They really don't want other people using these tools. They don't want to pay for them. They think somehow you might hurt things by using them. And so you probably will not have access to one of the top line data modeling tools. But it's always useful to ask to see what they are using so that you can do it as well. So a couple of things that I use, and I put them in color highlighted here. And again, the bottom line is, what do you have access to use? And these things can help you out. I've utilized all three of these for logical models, as well as, well, two of these for logical models, one for physical models. In some of my other videos, you've seen that I've used sqlDBM as a tool. And what I have found, unfortunately, from that is that it doesn't do a real good job of logical modeling, because this is that free version of it that's out there on the web and you can sign up for and use. It likes things in table forms, tables and columns and names and data types. This doesn't give me the flexibility that I necessarily like to have when I'm doing a logical model, so I tend not to use this tool for my logical modeling. If you're using OneNote, I use OneNote all the time for taking notes and doing other scoping and thought processes, because it's a very free format. It has some nice drawing tools in there. I like it better than Paint as far as drawing a logical model, if that's all I have access to. But my favorite tool for doing logical modeling is Visio. In case you haven't used Visio before, it's in the Microsoft Office tool set, but it's usually an add-on. Most companies don't buy the full set for everybody, so you get Outlook and the other Microsoft tools, Excel, Word, but you don't get Visio. I usually make it a point, if I go to a new company and I look at what their suite is, if they don't have Visio, I immediately ask for it. It is not that expensive. I'm usually get it pretty quickly from my organization. I also have my own copy that I use on my personal machine for all my personal work. I've actually done some writing of books and using diagrams within books that I've written, and put these in, used Visio as well, because it's really a nice drawing tool, and it's what we will be using today for our logical models. So let's look at an enterprise data model for the Daisy Hill puppy farm. If you've seen my other videos, you know that this is a common data set that I'm using, which is Daisy Hill. And so we're going to go ahead and do a high-level enterprise data model so we can talk about what that is, because it's the first step of understanding what's out there, and so you can begin to see the structure of your organization and to understand your data within construct of what the enterprise sees. This is a very high-level diagram, and it's not usually very detailed, but it just is to give you that flavor. The typical enterprise logical model will have somewhere between 6 and 10 entities in it, 6 being a very few number, 10 being, after 10 you tend to get a bit messy. So let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. We want to change this into landscape. I am a landscape drawer when I do this. There are a lot of stencils available to you within Visio. I have created my own that I do for most of my own personal work that extends or just simply has different drawing tools in it than what Visio normally has supporting it. And so for this high-level logical model, I'm going to use just my Visio stencil that I created, and we're going to deal with entities. So what is an entities? Well, entities comes from a list of things. And let's go ahead and add a text box in here. Typically I would have this in a separate file, but since we're just looking at one screen, we can do this as well. Let's go ahead and do my text. There's text. So let's go ahead and create this list of things. What are the things that Daisy Hill has within it as far as the entities? What are the things? Don't think about data, don't think about data, think of the things. Well, obviously we have puppy, and we have, if you're going through randomly, we have costumes that we use. Don't forget there's a whole bit about performance in there where the puppies are using their costumes. We had a training data mart that we built, so we had a trainer and a training session. So the way this comes from is looking at your organization, talking to your business, your subject matter experts, and begin to understand what the high levels are. I wouldn't expect you to go out and build the enterprise version of your logical model, but this can apply to just simply a subject area as well, just to begin the top of it. We had shows where they performed tricks. Puppies came from kennels. Puppies had a breed. Don't forget someone owns these puppies. And we had a little supplier that was doing some sewing for us. So these are a list of things that Daisy Hill has out there as far as the data that we've been working with and some of the general areas that we have used or I've used within this construct and within these videos. Let's go ahead and bring this down. There it is. We got our pointer. Let's pick this, get it off of there, up here to this page. There's out of the way. So let's start with our first entity. Well, what's the most important thing we have out here in Daisy Hill land? We have our puppies. So we have an entity called puppy. And a puppy has an owner, so owner becomes very important to us. Let's go ahead and add our owner. And we talked about a performance. And you can see all we're doing here is listing the things and turning them into entities that we'll be working about. So next I want to look at, so let's talk about how we connect all these things together. Well, the puppy obviously has an owner. So the owner, we want to define what that relationship is between those two, so we'll just simply draw a straight line, and we'll say that the owner owns a puppy. Make it so that you can see that. We can go into this tool very quickly. Choose this text. Let's make this 12 so that you can see it and I can see it. And if we need to, we can also move it around and put it in somewhere else. Make this a little bit smaller. I'm only going to do this once. After that, it's going to be cut and paste. There we go. So an owner owns a puppy. So we have the established relationship between those two. And I would take a look at the performance. And as far as the performance is concerned, the puppy participates in a performance. Participates. Keeping things visible by just moving them around. So if we look at this, we begin to think and say, well, wait a minute. We also have this thing about a trainer and a training session. So a puppy will also perform in a training, will also attend a training session. And so rather than draw in a separate box that we have a performance and a training, we can now begin to aggregate these together, which is what we do at the enterprise logical level, which is what is a performance, what is a training session, and what are other things that puppies might be doing. Well, we can simply call these events, as opposed to listing them out what they are individually. So now we know the puppy can participate in an event. But what about that? So this is how we are consolidating down our logical model to be just some of the high-level constructs. We also happen to have a trainer, and a trainer also will organize or participate in an event, whether it be a training event or a performance. You got to bet that there's a person involved in that. And so one of the typical things that we end to do is we notice that the person might also be an owner, but that person might be someone that's employed or a contractor. And so when you begin to get things up to the higher level at the ERD level at the enterprise, you begin to think in higher concepts. So what we always tend to have is a person table. And what we do is that will allow us to have employees, contractors, as well as, well, this owner. This owner happens to be a person. So we also have to have the concept of, well, who else can own a puppy if it's not just a person? Well, it also turns out that not only can a person own a puppy, but there's an organization, such as the kennel, that can own a puppy. And then this person also will participate in the event along with the puppy. So we can go ahead and copy this relationship off and say that a person participates in our event as well as a puppy. And we know that a person can also own a puppy. So then we have this relationship here as well. And as you begin to think about how you're going to be representing this data and using this data, you see that you have a little bit of a gap here between the fact that a organization or a person can own a puppy and how you want to deal with that. If you remember our data properly, if it was not owned by a kennel, we didn't carry that information in the data set that we are dealing with. But it is an important piece of data that probably is somewhere else within the Daisy Hill Puppy Form data organizations and processes that I just am not using yet. We also need to understand that there is a relationship between an organization and a person. So we'll draw that line here to relate these two together. And in this case, a person belongs to an organization. And while that's a little hard to read, we can go ahead and use our text tool, rotate this around so that we can actually see it, and then drag it over here as well. So we're beginning to flesh this out. As we go through the rest of these, we can begin to ask some of the same questions. For example, we have a trick that a puppy uses, and a trick is not an event. It's something the puppy has learned to do, as well as there's other things a puppy might be using as well, as opposed to just a trick. They may be some kind of trained puppy for helping the disabled or help with assisting the police force, etc. So a puppy will have learned a skill. So rather than drop down here and say that is strictly a trick, we can go ahead and think at a higher level and just add in a skill entity as we try to draw objects out of the way. And so this is the higher level view of what a trick would be. And we want to relate it to things. Well, for two things can happen there is that a puppy can have that skill. So we go ahead and drag, or copy and paste and drag in. It keeps me from having to change everything. So a puppy has a skill, learned the skills, displays that skill, etc. You could always put in there learned a skill, but they have a skill. And at an event, that skill will be taught or will be used. So we can go ahead and find a couple of terms to put in here as far as that skill as opposed to an event. So that skill can be taught or performed. So we can have more than one relationship associated between two of our entities at the enterprise level. So that skill can be taught or performed at an event, as well as we might find other ones along the way. So we have a few more things we haven't quite gotten to yet. For example, we have breed here. And when you look at the things that you have to also look at certain things. Say, well, breed isn't really a thing. It is a description of a puppy. And it happens to be reference data that we will assign to a puppy. It's not something that we have to understand at the enterprise layer because it's not something that the enterprise acts upon, creates, uses, or builds. It just simply is a descriptor, so we can leave the breed off. But we do have this idea of a costume. So rather than create a costume entity, I gave some thought about this because this one was a little bit tough. And I realized that what we have is that at these events, a costume is just something that the puppy is using. As well as there's some other things that we haven't necessarily tracked. As I navigate through this tool, this is equipment. So there might be a lot of different pieces of equipment that are used at one of these events. So let's create that relationship between equipment and event. And when I asked myself the questions how we were doing this, a sort of best answer I could come up with is that you could create or modify or uses that equipment. Because what I've seen now is that that event could also be our seamstress that is sewing those costumes. Would be a person. What are they doing? They are sewing a costume, and the equipment is the costume that they're sewing or repairing for that puppy. So that deals with that whole invoicing structure that we needed to use. And then the very last thing that I decided to add to this is a bit at a higher level. And it is where an event can contain some other events. One of the things that we have not had in our data set, but is definitely there in the Daisy Hill information set. Go ahead and drag that in there. And that is where you have a performance, but you also have show, something that we hadn't tracked yet that I know Puppy, the data set that I have, includes. And that happens to be the fact that we have events inside of events. This is, again, at the logical level. It's not something you would typically do at the physical level, but it is good to know. And so then the label we want to put on this is that contains other. Finishing this up. So our event can contain other events. We've gone ahead and covered all of these things that we had mentioned. And so then this would be the enterprise logical data model that I developed for Daisy Hill, to where what they do and the data that they have is constituted within these entities and the relationship between the entities. So something like a training session is that a person participates in a training session, which is an event, and they might use some equipment within that event, either a costume or maybe some hurdles, things like that. And obviously there is also a puppy that participates in that event as well. So this being where we start as we begin to look at our more detailed data, this is the enterprise logical data model. So here is this done a bit more cleanly than I'd done previously to actually building this with you watching. The next step is to build a logical data model for the puppy performance subject area that we were working on in some previous videos. The data model that I am going to produce is what I consider the next step up from the enterprise model into our stepping and developing the physical model for this subject area. And as such, what I do is create a more simplistic logical model that has business terms that projects the proper information that we will need to have the discussions about the data model with the business as well as with the ETL development. Even if it's going to be ourselves, it will lay the framework to understand the relationships between the data that are going to be used to generate our final physical model, regardless of the actual shape, methodology, or construct of that physical model. So the first thing to look at is a reference as to the data that we want to have in our report that the business had requested for the puppy performance. And so we will develop our logical data model to address these elements. As a reference point, we will be looking at this overall enterprise logical data model to make sure that we properly identify where the different entities in our physical model come from and the relationships they have among the data that we'll be developing. To utilize Visio's modeling constructs to make it easier for us to develop this next level of logical data model, we will have to use a new file that is based on the database structures that it supports. So we will click on New, and here we have the database model diagram for the US units. That's one that we will choose, and it brings us up with this blank picture. A couple things that we want to do is to go ahead first off and to make it into our landscape. You'll notice down here we have categories, so we can put some additional property information down here. And then we also have the database tab up here, which will allow us to customize what we see and do. Additionally, as I talked about before, we're going to go ahead and open up my stencil, because as with most things that I use on a regular basis, I like to customize exactly how they work and look. And to that solution, I have an ARD entity that I've created down here that allows me to do a little bit of resizing as well as customization of the fonts that you wouldn't normally have in the entity attribute here. If you would like to know more about this, please drop me a comment and subscribe, and I can put together a quick video on how I created my own entity that allows me to do some customizations as well as the overall setup for this page. So we'll start out at the very beginning and understand that what's the most important thing in here, and that happens to be puppy. So I'll drag my icon in here, and this is a very physical looking model. But if we click on this, we can see down here we have the ability to talk about its names, and this is actually just simply going to be called puppy. So one of the things I need to do early on is to change the description or the view of this database. So we go into display options. And we will start out with a couple that I know that need to be changed. We want to use conceptual names. For the table, we want to see primary keys, all of this, etc. We don't want to show the data types. We do not want to draw a separator line for primary keys, things in physical order, and we don't want to show this weird little O out there. So now when we do that, we can see that the puppy is at the very top of this, and that is the name of the table, or in this case the entity. We want to go within puppy. The things that we're concerned about for this table is the puppy name. Going to default this to some simple variable types. And we also want the birth date. So down here I can edit and do some additional work here for my data model, but primarily I'm just concerned about the names at this level. So here I have my puppy table and the attributes that are required for it. So now we want to begin to flesh out this data model for some of the attributes that are in here. Second most important thing we have to deal with is going to be the performance. So we'll grab and drag in this entity again. Coming back over here to definition, this is performance. And again, these are just English terms that I'll be using. And the only column about the performance that I found necessary within this modeling process is the performance date. And now here's some of my customizations. I am going to make this a little bit bigger and go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. And then I have a relationship between these two. So I'm going to drag my relationship in. And what I have here is the top part, which is without the period or the dot. This is the parent table, which is puppy. I drag it up till it turns red. And here is performance. And in my simple nomenclature is that the puppy stages a performance. So here very simply I have this model, make things a little bit bigger. Also want to make them bigger so you can see them. Highlight everything and set this equal to 14 point. So now you can see them. I also need to do a little bit more cleanup work to make it so you can see these easily. So basically the puppy, oh, we don't have the phrase there. Go back into our database view. Display options. For the relationship, we want to see the forward verb phrase. So here we have the puppy that stages a performance. And again, keeping this simple, this is a reference or a documentation or point of discussion and not a detail for how to build the database. So let's drag our other entities in here as well. We will need to have, we just bring them in a little bit differently so we can define them. We need to have our kennel. We need to have our breed. We also need to have the trick that the puppy performs. And then finally, we will need to have the costume that they wear. So this gives us the basic look of all these. Go ahead and drop this down a little bit so we can draw some more things on here. Let's set everything to 14. So it makes it more legible. So now I can either put in the individual attributes. So for kennel, we need 2. We need the kennel name. And we need the state. Make this a bit more legible. For the breed, all we need here is the breed name. And again, I am just utilizing the logical attributes, not really concerned about how physically this is going to be implemented, but these are just the pieces of information that I need to be more cognizant of. Having fun trying to get this the right size. Trick needs trick name. And costume finally needs a costume name. Clean these up from a visibility standpoint. Move things around a little bit so that I know that they will display well. And now we will draw in the relationships. So again, we drag it to the parent and to the child. Let's go ahead and draw all these at this time. Oh, nice. There's a nice typo. Trick. Is that a performance? And then finally, the costume was worn at a performance. And as I say those things, you might be guessing the next that I'll be doing, which is to actually edit these. So the kennel owns a puppy. The breed categorizes a puppy. Trick, I had a little bit of trouble coming up with what to have here, but let's just call it showcased at the performance. And obviously the costume was worn at the performance. There we go. We can see a little bit better. One last check of everything. Let's set these all to 14 as well so we can see them all. Move it down to make it pretty. So now we can see our logical model, which is fully supported by our enterprise logical model, and simply describes or defines how the relationship of the data that we'll be putting into our final report whatever its physical model happens to be. At the end of the day, we will want to report these attributes out. And here's where we can get those attributes and their relationship between the entities. So a kennel owns a puppy, the breed categorizes a puppy stages a performance, and the trick is showcased at the performance, and the costume is worn at a performance. So now as I begin to develop my physical model and then go into my ETL, I can find the attributes that I need to populate this, as well as how to do lookups and other processing within the ETL. It's a simple process that was much shorter than the other one. Here is our final picture. Might look slightly different just because of where it was laid out in the when I did this, but the information is the same. So this is my logical model. Discuss this with the business, discuss it with the database, DBA people, and discuss it with the ETL people so they understand what we're trying to do. Now keep in mind, in your shop, especially with Alteryx and being self-service, you probably have to wear all those hats, but this way you can logically step through the process that you need in order to effectively, efficiently, and through best practices, develop your data flows. And the final topic is to keep your logical model alive. This is a picture I used in one of my other presentations. There is a life cycle associated with this. As you begin the development work or the reporting work, you might find additional information that you need. You might find slightly different relationships that are out there within your data. Don't forget to update your logical model as you go through your development process, because this model not only serves as a guide for you and the development, it also works as an attribute in your metadata, and so that you can refer back to it in the future. And if someone else needs something data that looks like this, you can share this logical model with them to see how they might need to develop their own logical model for their subject area. So don't let it go stale, don't let it go to waste. Keep it alive during your process. I hope this helped. Thanks for listening and watching. Go ahead and subscribe. If you find these videos useful, drop me some comments for the additional things that you might like to see me put out there onto my YouTube page. And keep an eye out here for part 2 of this, which will be dealing with 3 ways to turn this logical model into a physical model so I can actually build the database tables and do my development work within any language, but targeting in the back of my mind how this would be done in Alteryx. So y'all have a great day. Appreciate it.